Hello Dabblers of the Internet, JP here with another Kings of War battle report, this one being the first round from the Clash of Kings 2022 Australia event in Canberra. So if you want to see my performance in the first round and then subsequently in the next 5 videos, the next 5 rounds, it's a 6-round event, then watch on. So for those of you that might be new to this channel, it's quite an interesting kind of channel because it has dual kinds of content. They have my Kings of War wargaming content, which I assume if you're this far into this video, that's what you're into. So I have that putting up, but my wife has her stitching content, and we kind of form this channel together as a couple of dabblers. And as long as you don't mind a bit of her stuff popping up when really you want to see some of mine, and vice versa for other people that are into stitching, they're getting this far into the video, then please subscribe, like, and comment on all the things that you might like to do. So this is the first big event that I've ever been to for Kings of War. So this is 6 rounds of 2,000 points across 2 days. So you got your 3 games on one day and 3 games on another. And never have I ever played so much wargaming in a single weekend. So I was very excited to travel all the way up there from Melbourne to Canberra, which is 800 kilometers, takes you but just under 8 hours. And it wasn't so bad because I was driving up with 2 other fine gentlemen that you've seen in these videos before in other battle reports. That's Matt and Dan, and we spent the entire trip going through every single list that was available on the tabletop.to website because we had to submit our lists in advance. And so we just went through every single one, A to Z, and I was driving, they were just talking them through. Matt was mostly doing the talking of the actual list, and then we would just sit there going, I don't think that would be very good, or oh, I hope I go against that, or I don't want to go, you know, you're just kind of just saying shit, because really, you don't really have any idea of how things work, especially with the kind of environment that was at that time. We know we've had Clash of Kings, the book, out for about 2 months, and we hadn't had really any events in Australia much. We just had one little event in Melbourne, and I think that's about it. So no one had had that much practice with their armies, with the new rules, and so people were kind of coming up with stuff. And I guess it's a kind of exciting time because the idea of a net list, insofar as Kings of War can have net lists, couldn't really take form. There wasn't a go-to thing that you could do because no one had really had time to test any go-to thing. So that's what made it really quite fun as well. Everyone was quite excited because maybe it was your list that was the one that was going to take the top spot. I mean, I personally didn't feel like that was going to be the case. I just wanted to win more games than I lost, or equal, 3-3. But, you know, that's just my goals. Most people usually aim for a little bit higher than that, but I just wanted to even out and have a good time playing 6 games. And so where we stayed, because, you know, traveling all that way, you have to stay somewhere, we stayed in a big share house with a bunch of people from Team Shed, one of the big Kings of War teams down here in Victoria. And that was organised by Damien, who found this wonderful place out in the countryside. And it's just, it's hard to drive there because it's going on a dirt road, and I mean dirt like it's bouncy, and you better make sure your car's nice and serviced before you go there and after. But yeah, the view of that place was phenomenal, and the place was quite modern and really nice. So yeah, that was a nice place to come back to after each of the days, you know, when your brain is just, you know, it's a bit fried, and so you can just look out over this wonderful landscape with the sunsets, and you've got the hills, like I think that's the Great Dividing Range, but you know, or the Kosciuszko Ranges. Not good with that part of the world, but yeah, just seeing the light go behind those hills, and it's just phenomenal. So I can see why people like to be in Canberra. It's just I will just visit it. I wanted to go back to Melbourne in the end, but I did enjoy my time there because the most exciting thing was the tournament. And so, as I mentioned, the lists had to be submitted well before the event, so I had to really think of, you know, what did I want to try and run? Did I want to do what I'd done before? And what I'd done before and I was comfortable with, as you've seen, is, you know, kinds of lists that have quite a few flame bearer units to shoot with, warlocks, and then the ghouls, and maybe Zazuzu, that kind of stuff, and some hammers. Or did I want to try something new that kind of embraced the new Clash of Kings 2022 rule set? Because flame bearers don't really embrace that. My previous list had nothing really benefited from that apart from the Tortured Souls. And so I wanted to see if I could try and take some of the things that the Forces of the Abyss had gained and just see what I could do with them. And so that will lead me into my list. Starts off pretty similar to all my other ones. I've got some chaff in the Gargoyles troop. best chaff in the game, as everyone knows, because they can get everywhere, and they're very cheap. Then we have a Horde of Tortured Souls, which is my medium hammer. So they're pretty punchy, but not the punchiest. But they can fly, even though they're height 2. It's a weird mix of different kinds of stats, but it makes sense because they are Tortured Souls. They're not the souls of big things; they're the souls of just humanoid things. And I've given these guys Sir Jesse's Boots of Striding, so that when they do hit with their melee 4+, they're not going to be hindered, at least that once, because you don't want to be hitting on 5+ with these guys, and you don't want to lose their Thunderous. Then I have the True Hammer, that's the Regiment of Abyssal Horsemen with the Brew of Sharpness, so yeah, you can see it's quite similar. And then we have the real baby, the one that really upgraded, and that's the Cronius, because he got his improved melee stat, and he also got that kind of pseudo-healing ability where he can heal nearby units for the damage that he does. It's like Life Leech, but for friends. And so he's in here, obviously, and he lends into what the whole list is about, which is the grind. I was thinking, can I try and enhance the grindy aspect? And you'll see that later. Then I have the Abyssal Fiend as my first source of inspiring, and the Abyssal Fiend's great because he's not compact because he's still on a Titan base, but he's compact in price from the Archfiend, so he's a lot cheaper, 175 points, and he just has very similar stats. He only loses 2 attacks to a nerve. He still has the Fireball 10. It's just a good, solid monster, Titan, but he just doesn't have Nimble. That'd be cool if he really had Nimble, but he can't have everything, and he's still alright with his just generally speed 7. He can still get around, but sometimes I just wish he could, move around a little bit easier because he can be a bit clunky to get around. But he's very solid, and he can usually take a charge. Then we have the Abyssal Champion. Now this is a new addition, so he himself is not very new. He's just not taken in my lists really at all. But I've given him wings, speed 10 and fly, and then I've given him the Gnome Glass Shield. Now everyone looking at this would be, why didn't you take the Seductress? She has fly, she has crushing 1, and she has speed 10. She does most of these things. But the Abyssal Champion has built into him some certain safeguards that make him just a little bit better, because the idea of the Seductress with the Gnome Glass Shield is that you see something you need to stop, whether it be an opponent's flyer, opponent's Mind Screech, something like that, and you will charge it with your 20-inch charge, hit it and stop it from doing anything. It's not going to get away, it has to fight you back, and you've got the Gnome Glass Shield, so you're at least going to sit there for 1 turn of combat. Fantastic. But the Abyssal Champion has Mighty, so just in case you do not manage to do any damage, the Gnome Glass Shield isn't really helpful in that case, because they're just going to go right past you if you're a Seductress, because you can't stop them leaving. They can walk through. I mean, if they have fly, then you can't stop them anyway. You didn't damage them, tough luck. But if you're trying to stop them moving, then this is the guy you need, who has his Mighty, and he also has regeneration and way higher nerve. Instead of 11-13 on the Seductress, he has 13-15. So you couple that with his defense 6, means he really won't die on the return strike, and he might even stick around for a turn after that because he only goes to defense 5, and he has regeneration, whereas the Seductress unfortunately does not. So overall, the Abyssal Champion can he's a bit more of a stopgap. He's more expensive, that's for certain, but I feel like he's just that little bit better, and I really enjoyed using him. And it also inspired me to get my old Abyssal Champion. I say old, I mean I've only been playing for a year. The old Abyssal Champion model. So he's old because he's that metal one that comes with the starter army, and he's all right. But I put some gargoyle wings on him, and by gargoyle I mean the Tyrannid gargoyle. It's probably the most plentiful wings on the market, and they're nice, just the right size. So I stuck them on his back, painted them in the same colours as his kind of scheme, and he looks so dope with that on there. Before he kind of looked a bit diminutive. He didn't really look, but he has these wings sprouting from his back. I'll see if I can put a picture on, and it just makes him look majestic. So I don't mind that they're on there, and I'll have to pay for it every time I bring him, because I'll probably be happily doing so. So that's enough gushing about the Abyssal Champion. So on to the Abyssal Warlock. Everyone knows what these do. These are fantastic. They inspire as well. They have their Bane Chant too that you can bring along, which you normally do, and they also have their built-in ranged attack, which is the Firebolts. So the idea is he spends the first 2-3 turns of the game shooting just with his Firebolts. Pew pew. He gets 5 Firebolts, piercing 1, not bad. And then as the battles get into good measure, you start getting the Bane Chant out. Bane Chant here, Bane Chant there. Most of the time he'll be Bane Chanting what comes next. But first, Manifestation of Baal cannot be forgotten. He is a fantastic model. He has a lot of special rules. He is a 50 mil base model, so a monster. He can fly, high 4, so he can see over the hills. He has a lightning bolt, so there's very little downsides to this guy. The only downside is he just has 7 attacks, which is fine, because anything more and it'll be really broken. But it just means you can't go throwing him into every combat you ever want to. You have to think about it. He has to go in with someone. I mean, I've even sent him against just chaff, and 7 attacks is just very chancy. And it's not quite the same way that you think about, say, the Abyssal Champion with his wings. You know, you send him in, you don't expect to kill anything. You expect to just hold it up. But you can't afford to just send Manifestation of Baal into something just to hold it up. Because if he sticks around too long, he might die there. Because he only has like 1 better nerve than the Abyssal Champion, and so you can't just go send him in and then lose him because he's far more expensive. So you really have to pick your fights because of those 7 attacks. And so it's I'm slowly learning it, and you've seen in previous videos I've used him quite well. And it's just always keeping yourself in check, because he is a monster. You hold him and you think he can do a lot, but you got to make sure you bring yourself back to earth. He is not a Lord on Frostfang. He's maybe more of a Rhinosaur Captain kind of guy. Can't quite take out a whole unit by itself. But now, onto the actual grindy aspect, because thus far it hasn't been very grindy beyond, I guess the crony is helping. And that is Khaza'ar's Torment. So this is one of the major things that came with the Forces of the Abyss Clash of Kings update, and that is the formation. And so this formation requires you to take a regiment of Lower Abyssals, a horde of Lower Abyssals, and the Despoiler Champion. And these are all generally units that people don't take, which is, the point of a formation, is a way of not so much buffing the units, because I guess there's just not much that can be done to the unit themselves, but a way of buffing them in a cohesive way that doesn't break them too much. And I understand it's a very difficult game to play in terms of what do you give them. So what do these guys get? Well, the Lower Abyssals, they don't gain much apart from the fact that when they die, they have Khaza'ar's maggots. Khaza'ar being the Despoiler Champion. So the idea is that Khaza'ar is stuck looking after all these Lower Abyssals, torturing them, and it's his punishment that he's going to perpetually always be with these maggots, Khaza'ar's maggots. So when Khaza'ar's maggots, they die in combat, they do D3+1 piercing hits to each enemy unit in base contact. So they kind of explode, and each one that takes damage gets the gets the special rule frozen. So they become frozen for a turn. So that means -1 to their movement speed. And that's just pretty cool, eh? Because that's just free damage. Why not? I mean, yeah, you lost a unit, but commiserations, you get to do some damage right back at them. Now, the rest of the formation is all down to the Despoiler Champion, Khaza'ar. He gets Life Leech +2 aura, which is pretty snazzy, and he also gains Inspiring, whereas before he didn't had Inspiring at all. So before, he wasn't taken at all, because without any of those Inspiring, like he does have, he's got Brutal, he's got Crushing too, but he's just 5 attacks, so yeah, he can put him in and put in a bit of damage. But for the same points, you could get something like, I don't know, or you're very close to getting the points for an Abyssal Fiend. You're not far off. So maybe you just get an Abyssal Fiend, or you could get a Seductress, or lots of other things with utility and speed, or anything like that. Because yeah, the Despoiler Champion, he is only speed 6. Which is actually my fault. In most of these games, I thought he was speed 7. Which is silly. I've got the army list right there, and I gave each time to my opponent. They always had the army list, but I thought he was speed 7. And nearly always he was babysitting the Lower Abyssals to give them that Life Leech aura, and I don't think it ever impacted any of the games. But if it does come up in any of the future games, it doesn't in this particular one, but I can't remember if it did in the future ones, in the other 5. I'll bring it up, and so I apologize in advance. But he's actually speed 6, not speed 7, and it's probably due to the fact that I've modeled him. He's like on a giant demonic horse, so that's my fault. But considering he is such a character as he is, he's not very good. It never really had an impact on the game. But I just got to put that out there, because yeah, afterwards we were talking about it. I'm like, no, he's speed 7, and they're like, oh, speed 6. That's what Matt Curtis said. I'm like, oh, that's bad. It was only on Sunday that I found that out, when we were all just talking about how bad it is. despoil their champion. So anyway, that's the whole formation. So it's quite grindy, right? So it's the +2 life leech aura that kind of helps with the lower abyssals who already have their regen. And so to, I guess, help them out a bit in different ways, the lower abyssal regiment got crushing strength 1. That's that free upgrade where you can just increase the crushing strength but reduce the defense by giving them two-handed weapons. And my thinking behind that was, if they've got life leech 2, they actually need to do damage to get that life leech off. And so this was the way of them being able to do more damage. Also, I had a bunch of models with the two-handed weapons because it's on the sprue and it's a pretty awesome looking two-handed axe. So I did want to start making them, and so I made it for this regiment in particular. And on the horde I have a healing brew just to help them heal even more, if I remember. That's always the tricky thing with these little 5-point items, especially the healing brew. So that is my army. The idea is that Khazar's Torment, the formation, shall form a core that will be unbreakable. And then I have all these hammers, the Tortured Souls, the Abyssal Horseman, the Abyssal Fiend. These things, and the Manifestation of Baal, these things can kind of clear up and push through and hurt lots of things. And the gargoyles get in the way, and I've got some support pieces, such as the Abyssal Champion to block things, and the Abyssal Warlock to Bane Chant either of the lower Abyssal units, because they really need it. So that was the kind of idea I've had in place, and I'd played a few games of these already before I came here, just a few practice games, and they hadn't done so well, but each time I changed it a bit again and again. So this was the final iteration where I'd kind of picked just the right stuff, because the early iterations of this list, I know I'm spending a lot of time talking about the list, but it kind of helps justify, I suppose. The early iterations I had extra stuff to support this Khazar's Torment formation, such as the Oathbreakers, which have Rally 1, so that's another new unit. And so I made a whole Oathbreakers unit, but it just didn't really help, because, you know, these guys don't... One extra nerve is not going to stop them from dying, the lower abyssals. It's better usage and not getting them into the wrong situations. Because you don't want to lose them, because even though, yeah, you get that Khazar's Maggot explosion effect, the problem is that by the time you've lost them both, and yes, you've damaged their units, you've lost 7 unit strength in an army that doesn't have that much unit strength. The rest of my unit strength, you can see, is then tied up in the Tortured Souls and the Abyssal Horsemen, and everything else just has unit strength 1, if at all. And so, as I found out in my games as I went along, that I really needed to not lose these guys, because then I couldn't play the scenario, because that's what the unit strength is needed for. So, there is my list. Please criticize it. You'll get to see it in 5 more games. I won't explain it quite as much detail in the next few games, but I'll always point to this one for people who need an extra lengthy explanation. So my first opponent was John and his elves. So John is from the Canberra Wargaming Association, so they have their own teams, and he brought his elves because apparently he told me he was quite excited about Drakon Riders getting their new models, and so he bought a whole bunch, enough to make a regiment and a horde of them, and that's what starts his list. So he has these Drakon Regiment and a Drakon Horde, and he has the Chant of Hate on them to give some vicious, because, you know, you need extra punching power, especially on anything that relies on some thunderous charge. You need to make sure that they can get something else in case that thunderous charge is lost. So that's what he's got in terms of the Drakon Riders. Then some shooting with the Kindred Gladestalkers, so they definitely got a buff thanks to Clash of Kings. So the Gladestalkers, if you didn't know, they actually divided them up into the different elven factions now, so that they all have their own little flavour. And if I'm remembering correctly, the elf version got better in melee, really. So they became melee 3+ instead of melee 4+. And so now they have, and they gained the 2 extra attacks. So they're up to 12, and so it just makes them a bit better. But what he really did, and was smart in this particular case, was the Fire Oil, because that Fire Oil, for those not aware, adds +1 piercing or +1 crushing, so for shooting or melee, against targets with regeneration. And guess what? Pretty much my entire army has regeneration, so he's always going to get that, be it in combat or shooting. And so that's quite frightening, because you've got this melee 3+ unit with crushing strength 1 against most of my army. So yeah, I didn't pay too much heed to this at first until it started kicking in, and I'm like, oh no. Then next we have another hammer. So we've already got the 2 hammers of the Drakon Riders. the Drakon Rider Horde being the greater of them. We also have the Stormwind Cavalry Regiment, which have been upgraded with Sir Jesse's Boots of Striding to give them that striding for that first charge, because they really rely on that thunderous charge for their armor-piercing capabilities. But with Clash of Kings, he has upgraded them with the Quicksilver Lancers upgrade, and this gives them nimble and increased nerve, which is much cheaper than what it would be to give them, say, the Wine of Elvenkind to get nimble, and there's no way to increase your nerve completely. So it's a fantastic upgrade, and so if you have just one unit of Stormwind, why wouldn't you? Then he has 4 regiments of Battlecats. Chaff for days. That's what that is. It seems a bit silly when you're going beyond 2, but believe me, when there's 4, you suddenly realize as you're getting through the game, you need to start killing them because they have unit strength. And like I said before, unit strength is key to winning the scenario, and these guys are just running around. Then we have the King's Champion, who is this fantastic individual. It's also a new unit from Clash of Kings, and he has a lot of special rules, but I guess what I think is so cool is he has very inspiring, which is awesome. Nothing in Forces of the Abyss has very inspiring. I really wish it did. But the King's Champion is very inspiring. He has Phalanx, I think he has Crushing too, obviously the Elite. He's Duelist, so there's a lot of things in there, and for such a nice small price. And then we have the Theranian Seaguard, another regiment that shouldn't be underestimated because these guys also can shoot and fight in combat quite well. They fight in combat well because they have more attacks, and they have Phalanx, and obviously Elite. But their Elite only affects their melee capability, so their shooting is not quite as good as the Kindred Gladestalkers, but they make up for that in attacks. And they still have steady aim, so they're not too bad. So there's 2 units of shooting right there. And then finally we have the last 2 units. First being the Elven Archmage, who has been upgraded with the Amulet of Fireheart, which is a nice nifty new item that now encourages you to take multiple spells instead of trying to shy away from it, because for 1 turn in the game you can cast 2 spells. And that's what the Amulet of the Fireheart allows you to do. He's put it on a horse so he can look around a bit better and get around faster, and he does that so he can keep up with his faster units and heal them and Banechant them, which he could do in a single turn. And then finally we have Taidarian Dragonlord, who is one of the most expensive, but one of the best dragons in the game, because he's a dragon that has Crushing 4, he has Elite, so he's not going to miss much, he's going to hit ultra hard to everything, even Defense 6 is scared of him, and yeah, he's just a nightmare to deal with in terms of just being a big nasty dragon. But he was very well painted. In fact, yeah, so you'll see in the next few pictures as we're going through the whole battle the vibrant colours of Jon's army. So he's gone for the primary colours of green and red, green denoting everything that's elven, and red denoting everything that's beastly, so the Drakons. And it's just a beautiful army to play against. Just looks great on the table, and I hope that he thought my army wasn't too shabby against it. But yeah, we'll get into the game right now. So round 1 was Control, and Control, for those not aware, involves 6 equal-sized squares around the board that you need to control by the end of the game. To control them, you need to have more unit strength in those squares than your opponent. The twist that makes it more than just capture all territories is that the square opposite to you in the middle, so this one here for me, is worth 2, and vice versa for him. He wants to get here to get 2 victory points if he controls that one. And so you do want to spread out, but you also want to focus. And so that's kind of how I was then deploying my army, was with the intention of getting my big dosage of unit strength right here, and that is the Horde, it's unit strength 4, just to trundle on over and get into this territory. That's all I wanted to do. Everything else can kind of spread out. I am aware of his chaff being able to go there, but I wasn't really thinking of it right now. I was just thinking about all the Drakons, because they were quite scary, and he had them all deployed over here. So let's get formally into the deployment, so that I don't just kind of randomly mention it. So, on his side, on his left flank, he has the Drakon Horde right there. That's the one with Vicious. Then a Drakon Regiment immediately in front of Taidarian Dragonlord. Then we have the first regiment of Battlecats that are in front of the Stormwind Cavalry. And that pretty much forms his left flank. Then, in the middle, he has one regiment of Battlecats, a second regiment of Battlecats, and then his Theranian Seaguard and the Gladestalkers, and finally the last regiment of Battlecats. Now I'm going to guess, but I think behind here, that dude right there on the back, that is his King's Champion, And then somewhere around here would also be his mage, but I think that is in this contingent over here, but we can't quite see from this view. But considering the Elven Archmage can get around quite quickly on his horse, it doesn't quite matter where he starts here. We'll find out soon enough anyway. So how did I deploy? Well, I was seeing this kind of side forming up, and I decided that, well, I didn't really want to face it all that much. So I have the woods to protect me a bit, so I put my gargoyles behind here because I didn't want them to get shot off turn 1, because it's a good way to just lose some valuable chaff. And then I have right next to them the Abyssal Horseman. Now I'll quickly mention off screen, because I didn't step back far enough, off here on the right there's actually my little gnome glass shield equipped Abyssal Champion. So he's sitting there and he sees all these flyers and he's like, I'm going to hit one of them and stop them. That was his job. So he's right there off screen. Continuing on our journey through my army, we can see the Abyssal Fiend just sitting right here to give his aura of inspiring around there, just onto this right side. Then I have my horde of Tortured Souls, and this is what he's measuring. He's like, oh, how far do Tortured Souls move? You know, it's the speed 8. No, yeah, flyers that are speed 8, pretty strange. But that's what they're here, and then touching the hill, but not on the hill, the horde of lower abyssals, with the Cronius next to them, ready to provide those heals and help them punch through anything they might get stuck up against. Then I have Khazar himself, the Despoiler Champion, and next to him the Defense 3 Crushing 1 regiment of lower abyssals. And then finally, on the far left, I have my Abyssal Warlock, which I put over there to just help kind of shore up that flank, but I'm not quite sure why I put him all the way over there. But I did want him to be able to shoot earlier, and if he was stuck here, he might not be able to shoot with all the stuff in the way. So there are the deployments, and you can see my dice nicely organized. Always good if you're new to Kings of War and you want to speed up your gameplay, organize your dice. Make sure you have dice of only so many of one color, and you know exactly how much that is, and that's one quick way to speed up your gameplay. So you can grab 10 dice pretty instantly. Just try not to lose them as you get across the game. So these are just some closer pictures, just looking at it, because this is what I did in my first game. After this, I stopped trying to take closer pictures, because you want to be pretty fast. But generally, everyone was actually really nice with me taking pictures throughout all the games, because this is the first big tournament I've been to, and I didn't know how people might react to someone constantly snapping pictures with their camera. But we can see, yes, in greater detail, and out there he is. There's the Elven Archmage right behind. So we found him behind the Drakon regiment. And then right here, we can see he's just about to get started with his movement. So here's my army. Here's a nice cool side shot, another cool side shot, and that was about where my artistic endeavors of this day ended. I was like, oh, I'll do this for every game, but no, in the end it became the bare minimum. So turn 1 went to the Elves, and they move all up. So the flighty flank went up much faster than everything else. So these guys just want to stay in the woods. These guys being the, I guess, the ranged contingent. So we've got the Gladestalkers and the Theranian Seaguard just holding into the forest, along with the King's Champion. Battlecats slowly spreading forwards, just testing the waters and keeping everything out of range. So nothing really is chargeable, and that's quite sensible. Setting up for a charge here with the Drakon Rider Horde. So they're just looking, wanting to see down my flank, but they can't quite fly up all the way here because of that forest, thankfully, is kind of stopping them from having any ambitions of looking right down my flank. Then we take a look here. This is denoting some shooting, so I always take these kind of angled shots where I'm like, look, these 2 units, and then I just hope that later, when I look at it, like now, I'll be like, aha, yes, the shooting. So the Gladestalkers are shooting at the most fragile of my units, the Defense 3 regeneration guys. So that means the fire oil gets to kick in. And boy, does it kick in. You get 5 damage. So that's on 12 shots, hitting on 4s. So not shabby at all. But that's okay. They could take it. And then here, a bit more shooting. We can see that the Theranian Seaguard doing some shots down at the Tortured Souls, and they get 3 wounds on them too. So not bad at all. But thankfully, good thing about Tortured Souls compared to, say, some other units, like the Horsemen, even though they're a slightly lighter hammer, they do have dash 17 nerves, so at least you can't waver them. But you can waver these guys, so yeah, that shooting worked out quite well over there, and we'll hold up that unit just a bit. I mean, To be fair, it's not like the main part of my army, but it definitely helps having some crushing strength coming across. So now it's on to my turn. And in my turn, I decided to try and meet all threats. I move up in such a way that I want to get some things in range. I believed with the Abyssal Horsemen that I couldn't really get close enough to these guys without starting to go into the wood. So I just moved them forward, aimed them in the direction, and I don't think I'm in range. The Abyssal Fiend went up here, and it just kind of eventuated that I decided that I better put my gargoyles in front, although oh no, I think that was definitely to stop those Stormwind Cavalry from getting a charge off on my Abyssal Fiend. So they just went right in front, but really what I should have done is moved further out with my Abyssal Fiend. So really what I did here is I just moved him a bit, and then I put the gargoyles in front, but you don't want to do that. You want to put the monster or whatever it is that you're wanting to chaff, you want it to be ready to charge next turn, so that there is a penalty for charging my gargoyles. So, yeah, I mean, it's a better use than gargoyles than in previous games, so I will give myself a B- for that, in all my wisdom that I've now gained. Tortured Souls just kind of move up a bit. The rest of the army then just gets onto the hill so they can now see some things and slowly progress down it, and we can see everything else is just coasting around. And oh, hey, there's Manifestation of Baal, so there's another guy that didn't have in a picture. He must have been on that left flank. So surprise, surprise, Manifestation of Baal's on the flank, and he's come in to party because nothing was on this flank, so he needed to come in and actually do something. So he's moved in here to ready to use his lightning bolt, and I think what I had in mind was to lightning bolt the Glade Stalkers, because they're a good target insofar as that they have very low defense, but there is cover, unfortunately, so perhaps I might have been better served lightning bolting something else. Yeah, so that's about it for my movements. I'm kind of held up by the maggots over here, these guys, but what are you going to do? They got wavered, they're very low nerve. The regiments, it's just, I think it's 13, 15, so it's pretty easy to wave them, especially when you get 5 wounds on them. So over here, another angled shot showing that Manifestation of Baal is firing his 7 lightning bolts. And while I don't think we can see the dice, I think only did a very small amount of wounds, or perhaps not at all. It wouldn't surprise me that I do tend to roll pretty badly when it comes to his lightning bolt, especially at the start of the game. Later in the game he tends to warm up a bit, but right at the start, Baal doesn't want it. He especially doesn't like it when I call him my Baal. So I've got to learn not to do that, because I think he takes that personally. But over here, what I had done, and I did not talk about before, so I apologise, was I had charged my little Abyssal Champion, as he was wont to do, right into the regiment to hold them up. So he just smashed into there and is ready to just hit them and hopefully disorder them. I think he must have. So we'll never know, because I didn't take a picture. But on to turn 2 of the elves, we can see what eventuates, and this time I'll try and talk about the whole battlefield. Apologies, it's a Friday night. I'm a little bit tired. But what's occurred over here? Well, let's start on the right. That Abyssal Champion, although he did do his best to try and annoy those Drakon Riders, invited the wrath of Taidarian Dragonlord's butt. And by butt I mean it's because he is so big on his base coming off it that he couldn't quite face front, so especially not with the wings of the Drakon Riders right next to him, so we had to turn him around. So really it just looked like he's about to sit on my Abyssal Champion, which would also be fatal, so I guess it's a good combat tactic either way, especially since individuals in the butt don't do anything. So what else has eventuated? Well, we got a lot of charges here. It was actually quite intimidating, like, whoa, all of it at once, because we also have the Drakon Riders. So perhaps what I should have done is let my Abyssal Fiend get charged and put the gargoyles in front of my horsemen, because the horsemen got charged. But I didn't mind too much, because the horsemen were forcing anyone charging them that there would have to be a hindered charge, because the forest, I knew that these Drakon Riders have a much bigger base than the regiment of horsemen there, so I knew that they would be hindered anyway, but I'm really banking on the hindering saving me, because yeah, so that will be a -1 to them, and that will also mean they will lose their Thunderous, but that's still quite the gamble. And you can see over here 2 lines of Battlecats, so it's a double charge from 2 units of Battlecats, one I think that was here, on the right side of this Stormwind, and then another from the left side, have both charged into my gargoyles to make sure they remove them, and I think they will. There may be a chaff off, but double chaff against my single chaff, I think I know which way that goes. And so obviously that's to clear a way for the Stormwind Cavalry to charge my Abyssal Fiend. The rest of the army, however, hasn't really moved all that much, especially the Gladestalkers. They don't want to move, and neither do the Theranian Seaguard, because if they move while in cover, despite having steady aim, and also despite these guys having Pathfinder, and it's just a rule that some people forget, they will still get -1 to hit, because that's just the rule for difficult terrain in general. Like when you move in difficult terrain and you want to shoot, you kind of get a -1. But yeah, so it's all just warily staring down the very slow half of my army that's just trying to get across. All I need to do is cross the middle line. But it's oh so hard. So we have some more shooting, I believe that's what this is showing. Shooting what? A bit hard to tell from this picture, so let's see if there's any damage that eventuates. We know that we have these two units that will be firing out shots, and it's probably going to be Tortured Souls and maybe something else. Well, it apparently wasn't important enough because I didn't take a picture. Instead, we went straight to this casting. So that's what this guy is doing here. He's going to cast, I believe, Banechant onto the Dragon Rider Horde. But I think he failed from memory, because otherwise I would have seen the token. But what we do see again, yes, there's some more wounds on the Tortured Souls, and that was from those pesky Theranian Seaguard. So our first combat underway. We can see these two guys have come in, and yep, they take him right out. 7 wounds! Fantastic Battlecats. He was rolling really hot, and the gargoyles definitely can't take 7 wounds and stick around for very long. And they shuffle sideways in kind of a odd crab-like conga line motion, so that the other things can better get in the way. Not better, but yeah, better get into combat. And also then maybe these guys can charge off into a different direction. So yeah, that's disconcerting. I've lost my single piece of chaff. Then looking here at the Dragon Rider Horde that I was so scared of, how did they go? Well, they did 6 wounds, and 6 wounds on a 14-16 unit is pretty good. You know, you don't need all that much to get rid of them. It's just a 10 to remove them, and it's an 8 to waver them. A wavered horseman unit isn't all that bad. But he did not manage to do that, and instead we move on to this combat, and he takes 6 wounds as well, which I think is pretty good. He could have done worse. He still had his gnome glass shield, thankfully. But obviously, for those, if you're not familiar with the way the gnome glass shield works, is it only lasts defense 6 for until it's broken, and so what you want to do is just try and break it with something not so good, or in this case something exceptional like Taidarian, because he's got crushing strength 4. He really doesn't care, so he destroys it, and then you can let the other things start to fight, even though it's only defense 5 afterwards. So you know, much of a muchness, but 6. But there was more than enough that was needed to get rid of him, so he is gone. And I mean, yes, he kind of held them up, but they get a free reform anyway, so they get to turn where they want, and they do, facing right down my flank, as I was scared of. But at least I got a little forest in the way, right? So yeah, we'll see the impact of that soon. On to my turn 2. So you can see this game is going very fast, and now a wallet has appeared on the table. What this wallet is for is actually to hold in place the regiment base for my lower abyssals that was kindly provided by John. So I was, you know, these kinds of hills, they're very tall, and with quite a sheer drop on the side. So getting something on there, you can't quite easily do it unless you want it to all slide down. And I just glued these guys on like 2 nights before this, so they were quite precarious. And I'm pretty sure if they just slid down that hill, half of them would just topple right off. Because if you've ever seen these abyssal models, they're kind of all dancing on single legs, so there's not much point on which you can place glue. So they are liable to pop off if you give them a bit too much of a shove. So that's where they have moved up to, just so they can get a good look at the rest of the army and maybe help in the game. And then the Cronius and the Despoiler Champion have just both moved up in order to, well, I suppose give an inspiring aura, keep these guys in check, give them something to think about, I guess. And my Warlock is on the hill, because that's where Warlocks do best. And so from here he can shoot firebolts wherever he wants, Baneshant wherever he wants. It's just a good place for a Warlock to be. Now, Manifestation of Baal has already gone off into a fight. I decided that I needed to start killing Battlecats, and this would be a good way to just jump in, kill them, and reform. How cool would that be? Unfortunately, this also requires the fact that I need to kill them, and as I just explained before, 7 attacks sounds like a lot. He looks like a beatstick, you know, with his giant wings, but you can't overestimate him. You have to take him as he comes, so we'll see how that goes. But that was the plan. Charge him, flip around, face them, and so then they'd have something from the front, something from the side. You know, it was brilliant. I was like tactician. Now, some other charges, so I'm definitely getting my counter charges in. So we have the Abyssal Horsemen, they countercharge the Drakon Horde, might as well. The Fiend didn't do any charging, he just turned a bit because I thought, hey, I'm going to fireball that Archmage, because if I got lucky, I might get rid of him. Wait, that's another if. Then I have charging into this unit of Battlecats, the Tortured Souls. They charge in there, and when they hit it, they would just not, well, I mean, they've got the Boots of Striding anyway, but they weren't on the terrain anyway, so I didn't have to pop it. So they got in there, and then the Horde of Lower Abyssals charged off the hill, very exciting, but then into terrain, not so exciting, so they lost it anyway, to hit the other unit of Battlecats. So I've got both those Battlecats engaged in combat, and will hopefully remove them. And, as I promised, he can Bane Chant, and so the Warlock Bane Chanted them, and I painted up these little Bane Chant tokens. It's just a round base, of which I have many from my 40k collection, and I just wrote Bane Chant on it with paint. But yeah, it was better than trying to use random kind of... I was using artillery dice and stuff before, but you know, those can get knocked or forgotten what it actually means, so I thought, no, make some proper ones, and because I just wanted it to be very clear what was happening, for me mostly, because I'm very forgetful. So they are Bane Chanted, so at least they got some punching power even if they're hindered. So here's the first phase of my dastardly plan, the fireballing of the Elven Archmage. Will I remove it? No, I didn't. I don't even think he suffered all that much damage at all. So that was a bit of a shame. Okay, well, what about hitting these guys? Maybe I'll remove them. I didn't kill them. I think I definitely did some damage, but they were going to get away very quickly now. They didn't care at all. Okay, well, what about these combats here? I mean, you charged in, you had some bonuses on them. Well, not quite. I removed one with the removed one with the Tortured Souls, but the Bane Chanted Lower Abyssals with 25 attacks just couldn't quite take out the other unit of Battlecats. So that kind of sucks a little bit. I think that token now on them means that they're wavered though, so at least they're kind of in the way. So, you know, you win some, you lose some. And then over here though, this was the real good thing. On the counter charge, the Abyssal Horsemen managed to take out the Drakon Riders. And that's all due to the merits of having the Brew of Sharpness. So that's something that your Boots of Striding wouldn't be able to accomplish. So another tick in the point of taking a Brew of Sharpness rather than terrain mitigation on the Abyssal Horsemen. But boy, are they expensive. Whew. And this is then me just trying to check and turn just to the right amount with this template that these guys are not in the flank, because that would be a real bummer for me if I managed to get a flank charge from that regiment or Taidarian. Whew, they would definitely be gone. And also due to this, no, they definitely have line of sight, so don't worry. That was not a train of thought, but at least I can't get flank charged. So now it's turn 3, the Elves. So, what have we got going on here? Well, they've got this double charge, so in the front, so at least it wasn't a flank charge, but I don't think they can take a a regiment of Drakon Riders and Taidarian. So that's what's happening there. That's a double charge, and the Elven Archmage is just catching up, ready to do a heal or a Bane Chant. Probably, why not both? Might as well now. Then the Abyssal Fiend has copped a charge from the Stormwind right in the front, but that's okay. I think he can kind of take it. Stormwind are pretty good. They're Thunderous too, but still, I think they can take that. And then over here we can see a whole more has charged in. I'm not sure if we've got another picture, so I'll talk about it right here. But the second unit of Battlecats has jumped in along with the Theranian Seaguard in the front, and then seeing their flank, the Gladestalkers could see, and they've charged in as well. So I think the Theranian Seaguard will be hindered, but unfortunately the flanking unit, the hitting on 3s and crushing 1 because they have the fire oil, they are not hindered because they have Pathfinder. So that will hurt mightily. And you can get a greater appreciation of this whole cluster truck of situation, including that flank charge right there. But hey, what's going on in this corner? Like I said, the Battlecats unreally injured. I think that's 4 wounds on them, so that's not great. I mean, you know, 7 attacks. He just didn't take them out, unfortunately. But they just backed away. They're like, no, no, no. And the King's Champion said, I will take this. And he jumped right in there to slap me around a bit, because he does have quite a few attacks, and they hurt. So that's what's going on there. I think this is to note the fact that he's hindered, though. So at least that's something. So here, these guys have just moved back as well, just to get out of combat, and hopefully free up something, I suppose, or just get better. Over here we can see that this is Bane Chanted, and he also didn't manage to do a heal, so I think they got back some wounds there. But now we've got the Bane Chanted Thunderous 2 hitting these guys, so I think, yeah, wounding on 2s. Nasty. And so that was the first fight that went to, so that was 9 damage on him and wavered him, but thankfully he has Fury, so fight on he shall. Then these guys will get hit, and they take a lot of wounds. I think these dice are not reflective of the number of wounds they're taking. They would have taken far more than 2 more, because they were on 5, and they're gone, because that's what happens when you get hit by Taidarian the Dragonlord. He's just good at taking out heavily armoured cavalry, and the Draken Riders they only help. So that was quite exceptional of them. And they reform, pivot, to face the rest of my army. Terrifying. Over here we have a whole stacks on again being done, and this time the poor lower abyssals. So these guys are not being given the chance to grind whatsoever. Their first taste of combat is a very bittersweet one. And so there you can see the wounds are piling up. Went from 3, it is now on 7, and they're gone. They're out of there. And everyone has turned to face, and you can see I got this frozen token on here because all those units now have at least a couple of wounds, and that is the passing gesture of my lower abyssals. But it was unit strength 4 that I've just lost there, and he still has all these units of unit strength, so I'm not feeling pretty confident anymore. And 1 wound was suffered by my manifestation of Baal. I think he'll survive. Time for my turn 3. Can you believe it's only turn 3 and so much has happened? It was a very bloody game. So trying to fix up this whole situation that's coming about, I can at least do a flank charge with my Tortured Souls into the Storming Cavalry, because I don't think he expected to be still there, which is fair enough, because, you know, sending in a cavalry unit to a monster, you don't expect the monster to live. But live it did, and so it fights back because it has Fury, and the Tortured Souls swing in from the sides. That's a nasty 36 attacks right there with Thunder 1, Crushing 1. Not so good. What we see over here, which I might have a better picture of, are the lower abyssals then charging into the Gladestalkers while the Cronius gets out of the way by charging into the flank of one of the Battlecats. Because I really am starting to think this is a lot of unit strength I need to start deleting, and so might as well start with some Battlecats at least. But I think the Cronius can handle that. Over here, this was a real dumb move, so I decided to swap out the Manifestation of Baal, who had only taken 1 wound and he just regenerated it, and put in the Despoiler Champion to take on this guy, the King's Champion. Because I was like, oh, I can get out and I'll lightning bolt something and off I go, you know, because I regenerated. But silly me, even though I had regenerated that 1 wound, I still suffered a wound. So I was disordered. You cannot cast spells. So I should have just stayed in that combat, which would have been a double combat. So if I had Manifestation of Baal, this is just me chastising myself, but if I had Baal and I still had my Despoiler Champion in the same combat, then we could have been taking them out, or Baal could have just charged forward and finished off those Battlecats, because I should take out some unit strength. But instead what I did, I just moved in sideways, and then I was like, and I'm gonna cast, oh no. So yeah, there's dumb moments like that, you know, where you're just thinking you're really smart, you're like, I'm gonna lightning bolt, but you can't lightning bolt, so he just moved sideways. And John is a fantastically very tight player. He's really good, and I just wanted to give him the respect and not take back my stupid moves, so I just lived with it, and it's a good way to learn your lessons. So yeah, you can't cast spells after you've been done damage, even if you've healed that damage. So away from that shamefaced performance, at least I get to see some spells getting cast. I believe that's what I'm showing here. What spells? It might be a firebolt from my Warlock into something. Yes, it was a firebolt. Holy moly, it was a firebolt 5 into these Draken Riders, and I managed to get 3 damage on them. That's pretty incredible if you ask me. But it wasn't enough to kill them, but that's okay. And now here's a picture from far away, a different angle. It's quite picturesque actually. But my champion managed to do 2 damage, the Despoiler Champion, so good on him! It's not the best place, and he should have had Baal helping him or something, but, you know, at least it's something. So now onto the lower abyssals with the Crushing 1. They came off the hills, which is a bit excessive because these guys only have defense 3, so I don't need that much crushing power. But in any case, I'm wounding on 2s. How did they go? Well, they managed to push right on through them, and now facing down the Theranian Seaguard, which are quite a bit better in combat than them. So let's see how that showdown works. But at least they're both wounded together, so maybe I'm in for a fighting chance. Then I believe my Cronius managed to destroy these Battlecats, but I don't know if I had a picture of that later. But what we see here is the demise of the Stormwind, which is inevitable when you get a flank from the Tortured Souls and a front of the Fiend, and then these turn to roughly face everything coming at them. So that's where I've got the Tortured Souls facing Taidarian. I mean, the downside is I'm giving a rear to these Battlecats. I mean, it is just Battlecats, so it should be fine, but unfortunately, this is just the lesser of two evils. I gotta face somewhere, and I definitely want my front facing all this mighty stuff. And yes, indeed, the Cronius did finish off those Battlecats there, because they're no longer there. So, you know, there's a good start, and I think I would have used I hopefully remembered his healing ability and healed up those lower Abyssals. So we shall see if I did heal those lower Abyssals in turn 4 for the Elves. So, not surprising anyone, the Drakon Riders went straight into the Tortured Souls, and the Battlecats did a rear. So Battlecats, you know, they've already done pretty well with their hot rolling, but in a rear, they're going to do very well. And then Taidarian goes into the front of my already damaged Abyssal Fiend, so I don't think he's long for this world either. Because if there's a Titan off that's going down, I would put my money on this beautiful red boy rather than my purple lad over on the left. Now this picture would have denoted the casting of spells, because I take a picture as they announce something, you know, but I don't think he managed to get anything off in this particular combat. And then over here we have the combat going on between the Theranian Seaguard and the lower Abyssals. Oh no, something must have got cast, because I think these guys... Oh no, that would have been the hindered charge that they would have received going through the woods, because I think that's a tree... No, it's an arrow going into... Anyway, I'm just looking at the token for the first time, because at the time I was just quickly taking pictures. I'm just really appreciating these little tokens that John's got. So that combat's going on. The cats have run off because they realise that control is indeed the objective of the game, and so they've just run off to hold some other table quarters, or quartets. So yes, I did take a picture. I think it was just to show that he got in there, but he did cast heal. He managed to heal 3 of the Drakons, so they're now feeling quite a bit better. And the Dragonlord was also feeling better, but for quite a different reason, because he managed to destroy the Abyssal Fiend. So, c'est la vie, Abyssal Fiend. You did a good job taking a strike from the Stormwind Cavalry, but you just couldn't take it from a Crushing 4 Dragon who's on fire. But neither could the Tortured Souls. My whole flank is evaporating right before my eyes, and this was quite concerning. Yeah, 14 wounds, that's definitely getting me in the danger zone. So the Battlecats definitely helped out. Over here we've got these guys now being wavered, but not all that much damage done to them, as you can see. But yeah, they just got wavered because, you know, they're chumps. But they have Fury, so at least they can participate in the combat next turn. So on to turn 4 for my Forces of the Abyss. So the champions continue to have their champion off, that being the Despoiler champion and the King's champion. So they're just fighting over here in the corner, and that's just my own stupidity right there, continuing to manifest. Bael decided that he needed to get some better line of sight on things to Lightning Bolt. I could have sent him into the flank right here and ensured their destruction, but instead I got greedy and thought, no, I can Lightning Bolt off some Battlecats or something. Whereas the Warlock is now running out of things to Banechant and decided that he's just going to start shooting as well. So I think I was hoping to converge my shots onto a single target and remove something. Because that is the extent of most of the shooting in my army, is these two lads. But what you can also see, and it's probably the thing I should have started with, is the double charge. So I've got the Cronius and the Lower Abyssal Regiment going into the Theranian Seaguard. And those Battlecats you can see there. So that was my whole army right there, it's not much. Yes, so I was converging my shooting onto the Drakon Regiment, because that is probably one of the major things that still remains, and they were wounded. So I managed to do 4 damage with their shooting. In this combat I do manage to pile on quite a few wounds onto the Theranian Seaguard, and what you can see here is him placing the wavering token. So I managed to waver them! Hooray! I didn't want that though, because if you remember the layout of the battlefield, I have my side to Taidarian the Dragonlord. So that's unfortunate. And there you can see the consequences of my actions, is that these Drakon Riders, they are not wavering, or they're not dead, so they can do something. Thankfully I don't think they can see this, but they can see the manifestation of Bael, and the Taidarian the Dragonlord can definitely see all the tasty sides of these two units, and I think the Cronius is on the menu today. So, turn 5. Will he take advantage of them? Of course he will. And John did so. He's charged right in with Battlecats and Taidarian the Dragonlord. I think the Battlecats was a bit excessive, but they're both in there to ensure the destruction of the Cronius in the flank, which is awful. The wavered Theranian Seaguard just back up out of the way. They're like, I don't want any part of this, so off they go. And then the Drakon Riders charge right in to Manifestation of Baal. That is a hindered charge though, so we'll see how that goes. And this fight continues over here between the two different champions. Huzzah! This picture then shows the continued journey of the Battlecats as they roam all across the meadows, as is their wont. So yeah, they've just gone off to get some unit strength to other parts of the board that I can't possibly reach. So wherever they go, they will claim, and good for them. Over here, he's managed to Bane Chant the Battlecats so that they actually can contribute to the fight a little bit, because he is Defense 5, this Cronius, but I don't think it's quite required. I think that the crushing 4 of Taidarian in the flank will perfectly meet the demands of this job. But they have been Bane Chanted all the same. And that was more than enough. You can see here, that might be the wound counter on there in the end, but usually when I see the end is coming, I don't turn that wound counter all the way up, so chances are he got 8 and then some more, and so he was lost. The poor Cronius was destroyed by Taidarian, surprising no one. And the reforms that are capable in this particular situation were few, so Taidarian I think just stayed exactly where he was, whereas at least the Battlecats just pivoted ever so slightly. Over here, the Manifestation of Baal did take quite a few wounds. There's 5 right there from those Drakon Riders, so that's pretty good from the hindered charge that they managed to employ. But he survived, thankfully, and it's turn 5. So let's see what I can do to try and pick up this situation from the depths that it's fallen. So Manifestation of Baal countercharges the Drakons to start putting their hurt on and maybe even finishing them because they're on 7 wounds. I think it's doable. But what I failed to mention, and can you blame me, is the demise of the champion that was here, the Despoiler champion. So Khazar himself was brought down by the King's champion, who sounds far more impressive. And it just goes to show that the Despoiler champion can't really do anything. He couldn't take on this individual, and he died. Now the King's champion is free to bring his terror to the rest of the army, because he is quite a terror. But what I have done is now charge the Theranian Seaguard once more with my lower abyssals in the hope to actually destroy them. There's not much else I could do. I mean, I suppose I could face Taidarian, but it's not like putting my front to Taidarian will make myself any more liable to survive than I would if I put my flank or my rear. I can only hope that by destroying the Seaguard that I will then be able to reform in such a way to face everything else off and die the best way I possibly can. So yeah, it's really just the question of how much unit strength can I start removing, and the Seaguard are the final bastion of unit strength in his army. Everything else is unit strength 1, so as long as I remove those, and then maybe I can remove these, then I think I'm in it, because thankfully Baal and the Warlock both have their own unit strength of 1, so that's pretty good. And so this is denoting some of the wounds being put onto his Battlecat, so I believe they're wavered, just from some of the pesky shooting that I'm employing here. I didn't Bane Chant over here, maybe I should have, but instead I used some Firebolts to shoot the Battlecats, because yes, they are also a source of unit strength. Then in the combat phase, my lower abyssals managed to remove the Theranian Seaguard, so that is 3 unit strength from his army gone. Everything's getting just a little bit tighter. 1, 2, 3 unit strength he has here, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 unit strength here. So that's pretty good. I'm outnumbering here, but that requires these to live. Baal also manages to tidy up his area and gets rid of those Drakon Riders, and then just shuffles along sideways, so he's just looking out of the forest a little bit. I don't know what I was hoping to get completely out, so then I couldn't get charged, but this is as far as I got. Turn 6 to the Elves. Now it's getting a bit close. So we have this King's champion coming back for more to take on my Manifestation of Baal, and can you blame him? Might as well try and take him out, because that is a source of unit strength. Over here, the Battlecats have continued their journey down south, just really out of the way. There's no way I can shoot them, so I just take pictures of their progress and note it down in my notebook. I don't have a notebook. That's a lie. That makes me sound smarter than I actually am. Then over here, the inevitable happens. Taidarian charges the horde of lower abyssals, and he's so big that you can't even see the horde of lower abyssals behind his massive wings. So, not horde, regiment of lower abyssals. So, au revoir, regiment of lower abyssals, you did well. And then some healing goes on for those battle cats because he needs to keep them around, because he, like me, we're both counting our unit strength and we're counting the number of turns left, and let me tell you, it's not many. And surprising no one, he managed to destroy the Khazar's maggots. But Khazar's maggots get their revenge because I managed to get the first damage of the game on this Taidarian Dragonlord. So, you know, there's the commiseration, but like I said, when they die, you're just like, oh cool, I get to do some damage, but I lost something. But I also did some damage to what I think... Oh, no, there's the King's Champion. Yes, sorry, I think he decided he wanted to charge here rather than Baal, so Baal's a little bit happier. And so everything turns to face my Warlock. Turn 6 for the Forces of the Abyss. So, I've moved my Warlock in just such a way that he's no longer in the front arc of Taidarian the Dragonlord, because I just can't have him get charged. He has precious unit strength right now. Whereas the manifestation of Baal, although being tempted by this tasty rear charge on Taidarian, probably still wouldn't be enough to kill him, because it would be 21 attacks, fantastic, but hindered, so on 4s. And so 21 attacks on 4s, crushing 2, doesn't sound like I'll actually get rid of him. But what I do need to get rid of are these battle cats, because now there are only 2 unit strength here. It's I got 2 unit strength, he got 2 unit strength, and this is the square where I can get 2 points for holding it. So as long as I kill these battle cats, I'm golden. So that's why I've charged them rather than that big juicy behind there. And so there's still a hindered flank charge, but you know, it's battle cats, so I don't think they can take it. Yeah. I did hope to kill perhaps the Archmage with some shooting, but he's an individual, so the firebolts are going to be at minus 180 anyway, and I think there was cover, so that wasn't going to happen. So I just did 1 damage here. But the combat did work out in my favour, they did die, I just didn't manage to get a picture of that before we then went to the next turn. So we did roll for turn 7, so let's see how that pans out. So we can see indeed that the battle cats have died, and I've then turned my manifestation of Baal to face Taidarian the Dragonlord. These battle cats have firmly taken this final corner, but they are a bit too far away to get into the next corner in this turn. So they've just gotten this far, unfortunately. They need to go all the way around to take this 2-point region here. Over here we have the King's Champion flying in, so this was the last huzzah. If he can come in and kill the manifestation of Baal, then perhaps it will be a draw at least. And Taidarian, in anticipation of the demise of Baal, flew over here to this side. So if in case he does have this, so we're doing some maths now, he is now in the 2-point area for himself. Currently contested by my Warlock, so therefore 0, but he has 1 off screen with the battle cats. If he kills this one, then I will not hold any, and therefore he will win. If I want to have my 2, then I have to move my Warlock, but then I would give this one up, and therefore he will still be 1 ahead. He will win. He'll have 3 to my 2. So he just needs to kill the manifestation of Baal with his King's Champion. And then I think he just moved over this guy over here so he could heal, and so that's what's occurred. I think it's a blurry action shot, I do apologise. That's better. No, he just moved over there to maybe do it. Yeah, he did a Bane chant just to get extra crushing to wound on 2s. So he's got everything going for him, he's going to do some damage, but it wasn't enough. I still have my manifestation of Baal, and it's really just playing it out. So by keeping this lad, my Warlock here, I've negated the unit strength that Taidarian Dragonlord brings to this side, and the manifestation of Baal has firmly got his side because the other guys are just 2 individuals. So it's 2-1 held by those battle cats in the corner. And here's a picture of those faithful battle cats that if I had actually charged them with manifestation of Baal like I should have all those turns ago, when I decided to just disengage and not lightning bolt something because I couldn't, then it would have been even more sure a victory. But because of that mistake, it was a very, very close game the entire time. And John was a fantastic opponent right to the end. And as you can see, that nearly everything was dead. It was just the sum of a few of my monsters. Not even my monsters, it was just a Warlock and the Manifestation of Baal. Everything else had died. And Taidarian had done quite well and survived as well. So in terms of attrition, because attrition was the blackjack system, so you have a combination of how well you win the scenario and then how much of the army you manage to destroy versus theirs. I don't think the differential was all that much between ours, but I didn't manage. He still had quite a few points on the table, whereas I really just had two units, and you know, I think those combined is 400, so I think he had quite a bit more left with the Archmage, King's Champion, and Taidarian, and one Battlecats, as we can see. But that was my first game, and I managed to sneak in a win, and I was very, very happy. And yeah, like I said, John is a fantastic opponent, and if you have a chance to play him in any future tournaments, definitely enjoy the fact. He said he's not going to take Elves again. He took them because he was nostalgic for them and he wanted to play the Dracons, but he said that they will go back into storage, and I can't remember the army that he normally plays, but I look forward to seeing how he goes with that and playing him again in the future, maybe at a future Clash of Kings. So quite elated was I with my first game being a victory of my first big tournament, and so the only downside of that is that you then go on to fight, if not better opponents, just not worse opponents. It's never encouraging when that's the downside to winning. You're like, yeah, I won, and then, oh no. Especially at such an event as this, we have really got the finest players around, and that does not include me. But I'm having fun so far. John got me a coffee, which was really nice, and yeah, I was on quite the buzz. So look out for my next video coming out very soon. That will then be covering Game 2 of the Clash of Kings. If there were any mistakes that you saw or anything that I could have done better that I didn't already lambast myself for, please put them in the comments below and I'll happily read them. I really enjoy all the different comments that people put down and the suggestions, and even if about the army list, if you think there's better ways that we could have crafted this army together, I'm open to that as well. But otherwise, for now, just keep safe everyone, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!